A long time ago, in a small, close-knit town, there lived a young couple named David and Sandra. They had known each other since they were children, sharing laughter and memories as they grew up in the same neighborhood. Their friendship had been easy and natural, the kind that comes from years of knowing someone's heart and dreams. Over time, that friendship had turned into love, and a year ago they decided to marry and build a life together. Their wedding was a beautiful celebration, one that brought together everyone in town. People spoke of them as the perfect match. David, with his hard-working spirit and honest heart, and Sandra, with her gentle nature and grace. They had a bond that felt solid and unbreakable, built on years of trust and deep affection. It was clear to everyone that David and Sandra loved each other deeply. David had always dreamed of making something of himself, of creating a stable life where he and Sandra could live happily. After the wedding, he dedicated himself even more to his family's small store, working long hours to grow it into something greater. His efforts paid off quickly. The store became a popular spot in town, known for quality and fair prices. Customers trusted David, not only because of his products, but because they knew he was honest and dependable. But as the business grew, so did David's responsibilities. He had to travel often, visiting nearby towns to bring in new products and make deals with other merchants. With each trip, he found himself staying away longer, caught up in the demands of his expanding work. Every time he left, he reminded Sandra that he was doing this for both of them, to secure their future and give them a comfortable life. Sandra was proud of David and supported his ambitions. She understood his dedication and admired his drive, but each time he left, a quiet ache settled in her heart. Though they were newly married, their days together seemed to grow shorter, and the empty nights stretched longer. Sandra missed the little things, the warmth of his embrace, the laughter they shared over simple moments, the feeling that they were building their lives side by side. As weeks passed, Sandra found herself alone more often than not, sitting in their quiet house, her heart filled with memories of the early days after their wedding. She remembered the evenings they'd spent talking about their future, dreaming of a life where they were together through every adventure. Now it seemed like she was always waiting for him to come back, filling the silence with thoughts of what used to be. Sandra's closest friend, Linda, noticed the loneliness that had started to show in her. Linda had been a steady friend through the years, someone who understood Sandra's heart and always knew when something was wrong. One afternoon, as they sat together in the kitchen, Linda gently voiced what Sandra had been feeling. "David's lucky to have you," Linda said softly. "But you deserve happiness too, Sandra. Don't let yourself fade into the background while he's out there chasing his dreams." Sandra gave a small nod, feeling both comforted and saddened. She loved David deeply and knew he loved her too, but Linda's words made her wonder if she was slowly becoming a shadow in her own life, a wife left behind to wait while her husband moved forward. Sometimes she wondered if David noticed her loneliness. Did he still see her as he had when they first married, or was his mind filled only with the demands of the store and his long journeys? Sandra tried to brush these thoughts aside, telling herself that David's hard work was for them both. But each time he left, the silence seemed to grow heavier, and the house felt a little emptier. And so Sandra continued to wait, holding on to the hope that one day David would come home, not just for a brief visit but to stay by her side as they had once dreamed of. David's business trips were getting longer, and each time he left, Sandra felt more alone. She tried to keep herself busy, but the quiet in their house seemed to grow each day. She missed David's laughter, his stories, and just having him there. No matter how much she told herself that he was working for their future, Sandra couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. One day, Tom, David's childhood friend, stopped by to visit. Tom had always been close to both of them. He was friendly and easy to talk to, someone who could make anyone smile. He worked on a farm nearby and often brought fresh produce to share. That day, he handed Sandra a basket of apples with a grin. "Thought you might like these," he said. Sandra smiled and thanked him. "You know, I was just thinking of baking a pie," she said, happy for the company. They sat together in the kitchen, peeling apples and talking about old times, sharing memories from when they were kids. Tom told funny stories that made her laugh, stories she hadn't heard in ages. For the first time in a while, Sandra felt relaxed. After that, Tom started stopping by more often. Sometimes he'd bring little gifts, a bunch of wildflowers, a jar of honey, or a few fresh vegetables from the farm. Each visit brought a small bit of joy to Sandra's day, a reminder that she wasn't completely alone. She found herself looking forward to his visits, grateful for the company he brought to her otherwise quiet days. One evening as the sun was setting, Tom came by with a bunch of roses. "For the lady of the house," he said, handing her the flowers with a warm smile. Sandra laughed, feeling a soft glow in her heart. They sat on the porch talking as the sky changed colors, pinks and oranges fading into the night. Tom's stories about his day made her laugh, and she felt a comfort she hadn't realized she'd been missing. As the days went by, Sandra and Tom grew closer. She told herself it was just friendship, that he was only keeping her company while David was away. But she couldn't ignore the small thrill she felt when Tom came by. Her heart would beat a little faster, and her day felt brighter whenever she saw him walking down the road. One afternoon, while they were working together in the garden, Tom reached over and gently brushed a strand of hair from Sandra's face. His touch lingered for just a second too long, and Sandra felt her heart race. She looked away quickly, pretending to focus on the flowers, but the warmth in her cheeks betrayed her. That night, lying in bed, Sandra felt guilty. She loved David, and she knew that her heart belonged to him. But Tom's company filled a space in her life that had been empty. She told herself it was nothing, that Tom was only a friend, and that her feelings were just a result of her loneliness. Yet each time Tom visited, it became harder to ignore the warmth she felt. He was kind, funny, and made her feel important. It was something she hadn't felt in a while, and as much as she tried to push it away, part of her began to wonder if these feelings were growing into something more than friendship. Sandra found herself at a difficult point, caught between her love for David and the comfort she felt with Tom. She craved that physical touch that David wasn't always available to give her. She knew that these visits were starting to mean more, and this thought filled her with both excitement and worry. During one of David's trips, Tom stopped by Sandra's house in the evening, as he often did. She welcomed him in, and soon they were sitting together, talking and laughing, their voices filling the otherwise quiet house. Sandra felt at ease with Tom in a way she hadn't in a long time. She missed having someone to share her thoughts with, someone who would listen and make her feel like she mattered. As the hours passed, they lost track of time. Tom shared stories from his day on the farm, making Sandra laugh with his funny impressions of the people he worked with. Sandra, in turn, talked about her life, opening up in ways she hadn't allowed herself to with anyone else. With each moment, she felt more connected to him, more understood. There was a warmth between them that seemed to grow stronger, a silent pull that neither of them could ignore. And then, almost naturally, Tom reached over and took Sandra's hand, his fingers gentle yet firm. Sandra's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she looked at him, her own feelings mixed between the excitement of the moment and the guilt building in her heart. Slowly, almost as if by instinct, they leaned in and shared a soft, lingering kiss. It was a small gesture, but it felt powerful, an action that crossed a line Sandra knew she couldn't return from. The kiss was gentle, filled with the longing that both of them had been holding back. As they pulled apart, Sandra felt a wave of mixed emotions. She loved David, and she knew this wasn't what she had ever planned to happen. But the comfort and connection she felt with Tom seemed to ease the loneliness she had been carrying. She felt a sense of warmth and excitement, but also a heavy guilt that settled deep in her heart. Over the next few days, Sandra couldn't shake the memory of the kiss or the feelings it had stirred. Part of her wanted to end whatever was starting with Tom, to push him away and remain loyal to David. But another part of her, the part that had felt so alone, yearned for the closeness she had found with Tom. She couldn't deny the comfort he brought her, even if it came with a price. Unable to hold it in any longer, Sandra confided in her friend Linda. She told her about the kiss and the confusing feelings she had for Tom, how it made her feel guilty, but also alive in a way she hadn't felt it in a long time. Linda listened carefully, her face thoughtful. After a moment, Linda spoke softly. "Sandra, I know you love David, but you deserve to be happy too. You've been so lonely. Maybe it's time you think about what truly makes you happy." Sandra looked at her, feeling a mix of relief and hesitation. Linda's words gave her comfort, but they also pushed her deeper into her feelings for Tom. She didn't know what the right choice was, but Linda's words lingered, encouraging her to follow the happiness she felt, even if it meant crossing lines she had once thought unbreakable. With Linda's words echoing in her mind, Sandra found herself drawn back to Tom, unsure if she was making a mistake or finding something she truly needed. The line between right and wrong grew blurred, and Sandra, caught in the midst of it, felt herself slipping deeper into a world she hadn't expected. As time went on, Sandra's relationship with Tom grew deeper. The moments they shared became more intense, and they found themselves drawn to each other in ways that went beyond words. On nights when the loneliness felt unbearable, Sandra allowed herself to cross another line, giving in to the affection she felt for Tom. They became entangled in a relationship that was both thrilling and forbidden, filling a space in her heart that had been empty for so long. Each encounter left Sandra feeling both fulfilled and weighed down by guilt. She knew what she was doing was wrong, but the closeness she felt with Tom gave her a comfort that she struggled to let go of. Tom, too, seemed unable to stay away, finding reasons to visit her more often. Their connection grew stronger with each meeting, and soon enough, the quiet town began to notice. Neighbors started whispering as they saw Tom's frequent visits to Sandra's house. It didn't take long before the first rumors began to spread. Some said they had seen Tom leaving late in the evening. Others claimed they saw the two sharing moments that went beyond friendship. In a town where everyone knew everyone else's business, it was only a matter of time before word reached David's family. David's mother was the first to hear the rumors. She brushed them off at first, dismissing them as gossip, but the stories persisted. People mentioned the way Sandra seemed happier and the way Tom looked at her whenever they were together. A part of David's mother didn't want to believe the talk, but her instincts told her there might be truth in what she was hearing. After days of hearing these whispers, David's mother decided to speak to him. She visited him at the store, her heart heavy as she chose her words carefully. "David," she began gently, "I've been hearing things about Sandra and Tom." David looked at her with surprise, confusion clouding his face. "What things, mother?" She hesitated, not wanting to hurt him or cast doubt on Sandra, but she felt she needed to speak. "People say they've seen Tom visiting Sandra often, too often perhaps. I'm not saying it's true, but maybe you should pay closer attention to what's happening at home." David laughed, dismissing her words with a wave of his hand. "Mother, it's just talk. Tom is like family to us. He's been helping Sandra while I'm away. There's nothing more to it." His mother's face softened, but the worry didn't leave her eyes. "I hope you're right, David. I don't want you to ignore things that might be important." David nodded, though he was still unconcerned. He trusted Sandra with all his heart, and he trusted Tom as a brother. He believed that the townspeople were simply gossiping, and he had no reason to doubt Sandra's loyalty. His trust in her was unwavering, and he felt no need to question her actions. But David's mother wasn't as convinced. She had seen enough over the years to recognize when something was amiss. There was a change in Sandra's demeanor, a brightness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. It was subtle, but it made her wonder if there was more truth to the rumors than David was willing to admit. Still, she refrained from saying too much, not wanting to damage her son's marriage with words she couldn't take back. David, blinded by his love and trust, dismissed the warnings, confident that Sandra was as devoted to him as he was to her. The idea of betrayal seemed impossible to him, and he brushed off the talk as nothing more than idle gossip. Yet, as the rumors continued to swirl, the once peaceful town grew more curious. and Sandra felt the weight of eyes on her every time she and Tom were together. She tried to ignore the whispers, but deep down, she knew their secret was no longer just between them. One evening, after several weeks away, David returned home earlier than planned. He had managed to close a deal sooner than expected and couldn't wait to surprise Sandra. As he approached the house, he noticed the soft glow of lights coming from the living room window. Smiling to himself, he imagined the joy on Sandra's face when she saw him. Inside, Sandra and Tom were sitting close, sharing a quiet conversation. The comfort they had found in each other's presence had made them bolder over time, and neither noticed David's footsteps approaching the door. Sandra laughed at something Tom had said, a soft, joyful sound that filled the room, and Tom reached over to brush a loose strand of hair from her face, his touch lingering a little too long. Just as David opened the door, Tom pulled his hand back, his senses suddenly alert. He glanced toward the entrance and his face froze at the sight of David standing there. Sandra's laughter faded as she turned, her heart leaping into her throat. She quickly put some distance between herself and Tom, her mind racing with explanations. "David," she stammered, forcing a smile. "You're back early." David's eyes flickered between Sandra and Tom, a slight frown appearing on his face, but he brushed it off, assuming they were just spending time together as friends. "Yes," he said, his voice warm but laced with curiosity. "I thought I'd surprise you." Sandra managed to laugh, but it sounded hollow to her own ears. "Well, you certainly did," she said, casting a quick look at Tom, who seemed equally uncomfortable. After a few moments, Tom excused himself, saying he needed to get home. He nodded briefly to David, avoiding his eyes as he headed for the door. David watched him leave, a small seed of doubt beginning to take root in his mind. Tom's reaction had been strange, almost nervous, and David found himself wondering why. Once they were alone, David pulled Sandra into a warm embrace, his voice soft. "I missed you, Sandra." Sandra felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She returned his hug, fighting the unease gnawing at her heart. "I missed you too, David," she whispered, but her mind was already elsewhere, replaying the moment he had walked in. She knew how close they had come to being discovered, and the thought made her stomach twist. After David had gone to bed, Sandra lay awake, her mind racing. The close call had shaken her. She knew she couldn't keep seeing Tom like this without risking everything. The thrill she felt with him, the comfort he brought, all of it came at a price she wasn't sure she was willing to pay anymore. When she finally drifted off to sleep, her mind was filled with thoughts of endings and goodbyes. The next day, Sandra met with Tom in a quiet spot outside of town. They both knew why they were there. She took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Tom, we can't keep doing this," she said, her voice trembling. "David almost found out last night. I can't risk hurting him like that." Tom looked away, the pain evident on his face. "I understand," he replied, though his voice was heavy with disappointment. "I never wanted to come between you and David, but it's hard to let go." Sandra nodded, feeling the same struggle. "I know. This has meant so much to me. But we have to be more careful. I love David, and I can't betray him anymore." They shared a long, lingering goodbye, each trying to convince themselves it was for the best. They promised each other that this would be the last time, that they would go back to being just friends. But neither of them truly believed it. Their connection, both emotional and physical, was hard to forget, and even as they parted ways, Sandra knew their story wasn't fully over. Back at home, David sensed a change in Sandra. She seemed distant and distracted, her mind somewhere else even when they were together. Though he had dismissed his initial doubts, the feeling continued to linger, quietly growing in the back of his mind. He started noticing small things he hadn't paid attention to before. The way Sandra would sometimes glance out the window as if expecting someone. The quick flash of worry in her eyes whenever he brought up Tom's name. The trust he had always had in Sandra began to waver, and for the first time, David found himself wondering if there was something he didn't know. His heart told him that Sandra was loyal, that she loved him as much as he loved her. But a small voice whispered doubts he couldn't silence, doubts that made him question the very foundation of their life together. And as the days passed, David couldn't help but feel that something in their marriage had shifted, a feeling that he wasn't sure how to address, or if he even wanted to face. Although David deeply trusted Sandra and believed in his friend Tom, he couldn't ignore the changes in Sandra's behavior. She had become distant, often lost in thought, and was no longer the cheerful woman he had married. The once easy laughter and warm conversations had faded, replaced by an uneasy silence. She seemed to drift through the days, her mind elsewhere, leaving David feeling both concerned and confused. David decided to speak with his mother, hoping for guidance. She listened carefully, her face thoughtful as he described the small changes he'd noticed, the way Sandra seemed so unlike herself. His mother had heard the town's whispers, the rumors that had crept into every corner of the village. She wanted to believe in Sandra's loyalty, but she too had sensed something was amiss. "David," she said gently, "sometimes the heart knows what the mind tries to ignore. I know you trust Sandra, but if you truly feel something is wrong, you must confront it. Ask her directly. Don't let doubt eat away at you." But David hesitated. He wasn't ready to confront Sandra. He feared the answer might confirm his worst suspicions, and he wasn't sure he could bear it. Despite his mother's advice, he couldn't bring himself to face Sandra with his fears. Instead, David decided on a different path, one he had never thought he'd take. Determined to know the truth, David sought out a witch doctor known for his powerful spells and remedies. The man was respected, both feared and revered, known for helping those in need when no other answers could be found. Driven by his desperation, David went to the witch doctor's hidden dwelling deep within the forest, seeking a solution to his troubled heart. After explaining his fears and the strange behavior he had noticed in Sandra, the witch doctor listened quietly, his face unreadable. When David finished, the witch doctor nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing in thought. "There is a way to know the truth," the witch doctor said, his voice calm yet heavy with meaning. "But you must be prepared for whatever you might discover. If Sandra has indeed been unfaithful, this spell will reveal her betrayal." David's heart pounded as he listened. "What will the spell do?" he asked, both eager and fearful of the answer. The witch doctor leaned in closer. "If Sandra is truly unfaithful, she and her lover will be bound together during their next intimate encounter. They will be unable to separate, and the truth will be plain for all to see. But know this, David, once the spell is cast, there is no turning back. You will be left with the truth, whether you wish to see it or not." David felt a chill run through him. The thought of exposing Sandra's betrayal, if it were real, filled him with dread. But he could no longer live with the constant doubt, the gnawing suspicion that something precious was slipping away from him. His love for Sandra was strong, but his need for the truth was stronger. With a heavy heart, David agreed to the spell. The witch doctor gathered the necessary items, chanting words that David couldn't understand, his voice low and rhythmic. The spell was cast, and David left with a mixture of relief and fear, knowing that soon he would have the answers he sought. In the days that followed, David returned to his home, each passing hour filling him with a growing sense of dread. He watched Sandra carefully, looking for signs that might reveal the truth before the spell took effect. He held on to the hope that he was wrong, that his suspicions were unfounded, and that Sandra's behavior was simply a result of the time they had spent apart. But deep down, David knew that the spell would soon reveal whatever secrets lay hidden in the shadows. And as he waited, his heart grew heavier, prepared for the moment when his suspicions would either be confirmed or laid to rest. After David had spoken with the witch doctor and the spell was cast, he decided to stay home longer than usual. He focused on his business from town, taking time to be with Sandra, hoping to ease the doubts that had plagued him. Months passed quietly, and nothing seemed amiss. Sandra appeared content, and their life together felt normal again. As David shared laughter and small moments with her, he began to feel a sense of peace, finally willing to let his doubts go. He blamed himself for ever doubting her and vowed to leave the past behind. Confident that his suspicions were unfounded, David finally decided to take another trip, assured that Sandra's love for him was true. The past worries seemed foolish now, and as he kissed her goodbye, he felt nothing but trust. This time, he was ready to focus on his work, putting the spell and the doubts firmly in the past. But things weren't as calm as David believed. Just a few days after he left, Tom reached out to Sandra. In a carefully written note, he told her he couldn't bear the separation any longer. Despite their agreement to end things, Tom confessed he felt as if his heart and soul were tangled with hers, woven in a way he couldn't ignore. He asked her to meet him one last time at a small, secluded house on the edge of town, one that had belonged to his uncle before he moved away years ago. Sandra, who had struggled with her own feelings, was torn. She knew their affair was forbidden, that it was a betrayal of everything she had built with David. But the thought of seeing Tom again, of feeling the closeness she missed, was hard to resist. Even with David around, she found herself unable to shake her feelings for Tom. Despite the guilt, the longing within her heart wouldn't let her stay away. So, as the sun began to set, Sandra quietly made her way to the small house, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and fear. When she arrived, Tom was already waiting for her, his face filled with a mixture of relief and longing. He reached for her hand, his touch familiar and warm, and they stood together in silence for a moment, both aware of the risk they were taking. But the pull between them was undeniable, stronger than any doubts or warnings. They shared a quiet embrace, words unnecessary as their feelings for each other filled the space between them. As the evening deepened, they sought the intimacy they had missed so deeply. But just as they became close, an unexpected and terrifying thing happened. Tom found himself unable to move. His body was trapped in place, his manhood was not moving out as it should, and Sandra, too, felt an invisible force holding her in an unbreakable grip. Panic surged through them as they realized what was happening. No matter how much they struggled, Tom's body wouldn't respond, and Sandra felt bound to him in a way that defied all logic. The fear in Tom's eyes mirrored her own, and they quickly understood the horrifying truth. The spell had caught them in its grip, just as David had intended. They were literally trapped together, unable to separate, bound by the very act they had tried to keep hidden. Terror and shame flooded through Sandra as she realized the depth of her mistake. They were helpless, caught by a force they couldn't see or understand, and there was no escape. They clung to each other, but not out of love or desire. It was fear that held them now, fear of the consequences they had never imagined would come to pass. As they struggled, the reality of their situation sank in deeper. The walls of the secluded house felt like they were closing in, and the weight of their choices lay heavily upon them. Sandra's mind raced, but no solutions came, only the crushing knowledge that they were trapped, bound by forces beyond their understanding, with no way to hide the truth any longer. And outside, the quiet town continued on, blissfully unaware of the unfolding scandal that would soon change everything. As the hours passed, the secluded house on the edge of town no longer felt so private. Neighbors had begun to notice strange sounds and cries coming from inside. At first, they dismissed it as an argument, or perhaps a couple in distress. But as the noises continued, curiosity began to stir. Whispers of strange happenings at the old house spread, reaching the ears of Priscilla, the town's notorious busybody. Known for her endless appetite for gossip, Priscilla couldn't resist the lure of a mystery waiting to be solved. Determined to investigate, Priscilla made her way to the house and knocked firmly on the door. To her surprise, frantic voices on the other side responded, pleading for help. The desperation in the voices of Sandra and Tom shocked her, and she immediately realized something was seriously wrong. Without wasting another second, Priscilla dialed for help, requesting both an ambulance and the police. Before long, flashing lights and sirens filled the quiet street. Police officers and paramedics arrived, hurrying to the scene as Priscilla explained the cries she had heard. When they entered the house, the responders were met with a sight that stopped them in their tracks. Sandra and Tom, trapped in an embarrassing and inescapable situation, helplessly entwined due to the spell's powerful grip. The officers exchanged looks of surprise and shock as the reality of the situation sank in. It was clear this wasn't a simple rescue, but something far stranger. And as word spread of the shocking discovery, neighbors gathered outside, murmuring and straining to catch a glimpse of the scandal unfolding inside. Priscilla, eager to spread the news, wasted no time sharing every detail with anyone who would listen. Within minutes, the neighborhood was buzzing with talk of Sandra and Tom, their affair exposed in the most humiliating way imaginable. Curious onlookers pushed closer, peering through windows and crowding around the front of the house, transforming the private drama into a public spectacle. The scene outside grew chaotic as people gossiped loudly, exchanging theories and gasping at each new detail that emerged. The police, struggling to maintain control, tried to hold back the growing crowd. But as more people arrived, fueled by curiosity and eager to witness the scandal firsthand, the officers were forced to take stronger action. They resorted to pepper spray to push back the onlookers, clearing a path for the ambulance to bring Sandra and Tom out. Inside the house, Sandra and Tom's panic only grew as they realized there was no escaping the consequences of their actions. The secret they had fought to keep hidden was now out in the open, with the entire town watching as their affair was laid bare. As paramedics carefully transported Sandra and Tom to the ambulance, the gathered crowd erupted in whispers and laughter, the scandal spreading like wildfire. What had started as a hidden love affair was now the talk of the town, the unfolding scene capturing the city's collective attention. And as they disappeared into the ambulance, Sandra and Tom knew that their lives would never be the same. The love they had hidden away had become a spectacle, a public shame that would linger long after the crowds dispersed and the flashing lights faded. Word of the scandal reached David swiftly, the whispers and shocked faces surrounding him wherever he went. The humiliation and pain ran deeper than anything he had ever imagined. But instead of rushing to the hospital where Sandra and Tom were being treated, he took a different path. Determined and composed, David made his way back to the forest, to the witch doctor who had cast the spell that revealed everything. When he arrived, the witch doctor was already waiting, a knowing expression on his face as David approached. David pulled out the agreed payment, a sum that felt heavy in his hand, yet he handed it over without hesitation. The witch doctor took the money and with a steady gaze met David's eyes. "The spell worked," the witch doctor said softly, his tone laced with a hint of sorrow. "But remember, David, magic alone didn't bring you here. It was your doubt, your fears. Sometimes, our own minds and suspicions can be as powerful as any spell." David's grip tightened, his heart sinking as the witch doctor's words hit him with a harsh truth. His suspicions had played their own role, pushing him down a path that had led to this painful revelation. With a nod, David took in the witch doctor's words, unable to find his own voice. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Sandra and Tom had been separated, though the damage had already been done. Their reputations were tarnished beyond repair. The once friendly glances they received from neighbors had turned to glares of disapproval and whispers of scorn. Both Sandra and Tom were left to face the harsh consequences of their actions, knowing that the lives they had once lived could never be regained. When David finally went to confront Sandra and Tom, he was met with tearful apologies. Sandra's face was pale, her eyes red and puffy as she looked at him, filled with regret. "I'm so sorry, David," she whispered, barely able to meet his gaze. She knew her words were empty now, that no apology would ever mend the betrayal. Tom stood in silence, his shoulders slumped, guilt and shame clear in his face. David looked at them both, his heart filled with hurt and anger. But their apologies, their remorse, only reminded him of how deep the wound went, and he realized that forgiveness would not come easily, if at all. Returning home, David was greeted by his mother, who had been anxiously awaiting his arrival. She pulled him into a quiet corner, her face soft with sympathy, yet stern with wisdom. She had sensed the unease in him for months, had seen the pain in his eyes when he spoke of Sandra, and now she could see the depth of his hurt. "David," she said gently, "I know this pain feels unbearable, but I want you to remember who you are, who you have always been. Don't let their betrayal harden your heart. She placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezing gently. You can't change what happened, but you can decide what you will become after this. David nodded, though his heart felt heavy. He appreciated his mother's words, yet he knew that the path to healing was one he would have to walk alone, and it would be long. Linda, Sandra's close friend, had watched the scandal unfold in shock. She had encouraged Sandra to follow her happiness, thinking she was helping a friend find peace. But now, seeing the fallout, Linda felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She had urged Sandra to think only of her own feelings, never realizing how deeply it would affect everyone involved. One evening, Linda approached David, her face filled with regret. David, I wanted to say I'm sorry. I thought I was helping Sandra. I didn't know things would go this far. David looked at her, his expression unreadable. Maybe we all should have thought more carefully, he replied quietly, his words heavy with meaning. Linda nodded, understanding that her advice had played its own part in the events that had unfolded, and she knew she would have to live with that guilt. David left their conversation feeling no lighter, but he knew that some weight could not be lifted by apologies alone. The lives that had once been entwined were now broken, their relationships torn apart. He walked back home with the understanding that sometimes no amount of remorse could mend what had been shattered. And as he closed the door behind him, he knew that the life he had known was gone, and only time would tell what would grow from the ruins of trust and love that had once bound them all together. David, finally certain of Sandra's infidelity, made the difficult decision to divorce her. The betrayal had cut him deeply, not only breaking his marriage, but leaving a wound in his heart and his trust that he doubted would ever fully heal. The ordeal had cost him dearly, not just in the money he had spent on uncovering the truth, but in the peace of mind he once took for granted. Sandra was left to face the consequences of her choices. Once respected and loved in town, she now found herself isolated, her reputation tarnished, and the whispers of townsfolk following her wherever she went. She became the subject of gossip, people casting judgment over her every move. Friends who had once stood by her drifted away, unwilling to associate with the scandal that surrounded her. Linda, her closest friend, tried to comfort Sandra in her quiet moments, but even Linda couldn't erase the shame Sandra felt. Sandra realized with a painful clarity that she had destroyed something precious. The trust and love she once shared with David, the life they had built together, all of it was gone, and there was no going back. She was left alone to pick up the pieces, knowing that the damage was of her own making. David, meanwhile, channeled his hurt into his work. The pain of betrayal from both his wife and his closest friend weighed heavily on him, but he used it as fuel to move forward, finding new strength in focusing on his business. Every day he poured his energy into building something meaningful, determined to make a better future for himself, independent of the people who had failed him. Through it all, David found solace in reconnecting with his mother. Her steady presence and gentle wisdom became a source of comfort, and he took time to reflect on what had led to the breakdown of his marriage. He realized that trust, once broken, was difficult to rebuild, and that jealousy and doubt, when allowed to fester, could lead to devastating consequences. In time, the story of David, Sandra, Tom, and the witch doctor became a tale shared throughout the town. People spoke of it as a cautionary tale, a story that warned of the dangers of suspicion, jealousy, and betrayal. It was a reminder to future generations of the thin line that separates trust from betrayal and the hidden costs that come from trying to control others through suspicion and mysticism. David's tale echoed through the town for years to come, a powerful lesson of what happens when love and trust give way to deception and doubt, and a reminder that sometimes in seeking the truth, we must be prepared to face the price it demands.